Good morning, all. How are you guys doing today? Hope you're doing and feeling well. Okay, today we're going to look at data science using Python. So this is the introduction class, right? So now this course will enable you to understand data science from the foundational level down to the expert level, right? So here we're going to look at just the introduction to data science, right? To understand what data science is and the importance of data science. So this course is not only for computing students, it's not only for Python programmers, no, because data science is an interdisciplinary field. So if you're in business admin, if you're in public administration, if you're in medical, um, if you're medical students or law students, right? We all generate data every day, ranging from our pictures, from our text, where we do tweets, where we do send texts. So these all are used for to make decisions, right? So you need to understand how these data are being used to make decisions. So definitely data science is for everybody, not for only computer students. So in terms of Python, right? So because of this lecture, we're going to, after this, the next lesson will look at the fundamentals of data structure using Python. So if you understand the fundamentals, then that means you're at least 50% good to go using doing the practicals in data science using Python. So we're going to look at the next slide, which is the introduction to data science, right? So now what is data science? Like I said before, we generate data every day. Everybody generates data every day. So that you are posting pictures or sending text messages or posting uh videos and so many things like that. So but the basic thing here in data science because is need to understand the type of data we use to solve a particular problem. So now what is a data science? Data science is an interdisciplinary field, right? That uses scientific methods, algorithm, and systems to extract knowledge and insight from structured and unstructured data. Okay, so now you can see here we have the structured and unstructured data. Now, what is a structured data? Right. So structured data is like it has a table format, and table basis of rows and column. So structured data is highly organized and easily searchable data that is stored in fixed format, typically in rows and columns, like I said before. So it's also found in database, especially relational database management system. So in the course of this lecture, we're going to use the MySQL, right? So MySQL is one of the examples of relational database management system. We're going to use that in the course of this lecture. So even if you don't understand it, right? So I'm going to teach it in a way that you easily understand what it is and easily understand the practical aspect of using the MySQL database, especially for data analysis, right? And also the most popular spreadsheet we're using here is the Excel spread is the Excel, right? So where each data point is defined by a specific field of attributes, right? So that's what we're going to use for structured data. And the problems we're going to look at in structured data in this data science course is the classification problem or the binary classification problem, the multi-classification problem, the time series problem, and also the regression problem. So we're going to look at those problems here. So for unstructured data, we're going to basically look at natural language processing problems, which involves mainly an information extraction and then maybe sentiment analysis, which is somehow should I call it semi-structured? Okay, we'll look at that when we're looking at how to solve the sentiment analysis problem or the cost evaluation problems, because we'll pick out three word problems here so that we can be able to solve that. So if you can solve that, that means you can be able to solve any reward problems, right? So let's look at unstructured data. Now, what is unstructured data? So unstructured data basically lacks a predefined format or organization, making it more difficult to store, right, search, analyze. So this type of data is often used for text analysis. Like I said, text analysis mainly, in this course we'll look at the natural language processing and problems, right? So it mainly used for text analysis and multimedia files or content and other types of data do not neatly fit into rows and columns, right? So we also have another type of data though, which is a semi-structured data, which lies between the structured and unstructured data. So it has some organizational properties such as tags or markers. So we're going to look at this as semi-structured data when the time comes, right? So it makes it easier to analyze them because of the tags or markers that they have, right? So it's not purely unstructured data, but still lacks the rigid structure of fully structured data. So mainly example is in the JSON and the XML files, which we're going to look at in the course of this lecture, because what the course of this lecture is to do a full-time practical, because I believe in practical. I believe that when you do things, you can be able to understand it, and you will hardly forget it, right? But like I said before, this course is not just for Python programmers, not for computing students, but for everyone to get started with data science up to the expert level. So let's look at it. We have some key components of data science. We have some key components of data science, which is data collection. So for every problem we pick, if you are using, let's say for instance, we have a customer churn problem. Now, when I mean customer churn, I mean a problem that involves why your customer is leaving your company, right? Or why or is it that your customer is leaving or they are staying? So that is customer churn. So and that problem is actually a classification problem, because either they are leaving or staying, which leaving or staying it can be categorized as 1 or 0. So that's a classification problem. So and now you need to gather data in order to solve this problem. Now there are some scenarios where the organization already have data that has to do with customers, right? So you need to gather them, right? You need to gather this data, then you need to plan your aim and your objective, your goal. You need to plan them and your objective, and how you can be able to like use this data. So another thing that has to come into play is the data cleaning. The data cleaning. So that cleaning has to do with processing and refining data to ensure quality and consistency. So definitely we have to look at the data. We have to look at if there's an empty. What do we do if there's an empty data or the empty values? What do we do? Are we imputing or are we just removing it? So all these things we're going to learn here in the course of this lecture. So now the next one we look at here, although it's not here, which is a third one, which has to do with data analysis. So we apply statistical method and algorithms to interpret data, right? So we see how it is. So the fourth one is data visualization, where we'll be using the Matplotlib and the Seaborn library to be able to visualize data. So we'll be presenting data in a graphical format to make insights clearer to the user or to the listener, right? So the last one we'll look at here is a machine learning. So machine learning is all about building models that make prediction and classify data, right? So once we have done this, we have to build a model. So in this machine learning, we'll pick two types, which are the supervised and the unsupervised, right? So in the supervised, there are so many algorithms we pick there, right? So majorly we'll work with linear, we'll work with logistic, we'll work with naive Bayes, we'll work with decision tree, and we'll work with random forest or support vector machine. So we're going to work with all these and see how they easily come into life, right? Because the essence of this doing this lecture is for you guys to be able to solve real world problems and not a class problem. So because we are going to pick a real world problem so that we can solve them, right, using these components from down to data collection, data cleaning, data visualization, and then the machine learning. Then for the unsupervised learning, right? So mainly we'll actually look at the transformer model, which is large language transformer models, and also the neural network model, the neural network machine learning algorithm. So we're going to look at that also, and not actually picking using the library itself, but we need to understand the mathematical concept behind this algorithm so that you can be able to analyze it and then understand how this algorithm works. So that's the course. That's what we do here in the course of this lecture, right? So why studying data structure? Now, what is the importance of data structure? So we're going to move on to the next slide. So the importance of data structure, the first one is to make better decisions. So data driven, right? So data driven insight leads to a more informed and effective decision making, right? So it makes, if you understand data science very well, if you're a good data scientist, you can be able to make better decisions with the data that you have, right? So the second one, we have to predict trends. So trends, I think trends fall under the time series problem. So we're going to learn how to do that, right? So it anticipates future trends and behavior through predictive analysis. So this falls under the time series, right? So the trending problem, we're going to look at some trending problems here and how we can be able to solve that. Now the third one is the optimized processes. Now the optimized processes improve efficiency and reduce cost by analyzing and refining processes, right? So we're going to look at that also. Then for the personalized services, basically the main scope here, we're going to look at recommendation system. And the problem we'll pick here is a cold start problem where a system like fails to recommend items to new users or new items to existing items. So we're going to look at that for recommendations today, because basically the two major going we have for recommendation system is the content based filtering and the collaborative filtering. But research have shown that so many problems exist in recommendation system that one of the major problem which had been flogged, and the researchers are still like overflogging it, is the cold start problem. So we're going to learn that here. I'm going to try to like expose the algorithms to better solve that, right? So here in the course of this lecture. Now this lecture is very broad, right? But the introduction part is very broad, down to the expert level is very broad. But if you can be able to understand the introduction part, because there are so many things that were exposed to you guys here which you won't see in other videos, right? So our next lesson will talk about data structure and data science, right? Using Python. Data structure using Python. Because before you need to move further to understand data science in Python, you need to understand the data structure in Python, right? So now, this doesn't concern computer science students, this doesn't concern software engineering students, this doesn't concern data science students, right? So everybody can learn it, right? There's nothing that's hard these days. Everything is simple, everybody can learn it. So I want you guys to watch the next video tutorial so you can get started using Python. And another thing, the integrated development environment we'll be using, the IDE we'll be using here is the Visual Studio. I'm not using Anaconda, right? I'm not using Anaconda, I'm using the Visual Studio to do all my lecture, right? So I hope you understand. If you have any question, feel free to ask me in my comment section. I'm always there to reply you. Once again, thank you and God bless you all.